Your network is fast. Your plans are competitive. Your app works fine. So why are customers still walking away? Welcome to Next Signal, the podcast that cuts through the noise to find what's actually moving the needle in telecom.
Good day, and thank you for joining us on podcast number 4. We're very excited about sharing key insights on how you leverage the self-assessment tool that we've just launched. And I'm very fortunate to have with me my longstanding buddy, friend, Will Gibson. Will, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Will, episode 4 now, so I'll keep this very brief. I'm an avid Newcastle United fan. I'm a Brit. And I'm a telecoms aficionado and looking forward to learning something from our special guest this week and giving something back to you, the audience. So looking forward to this episode.
Great. And Mack is an expert, a guru when it comes to consumer insights and research in the industry. I've known Mack for quite a few years working in the banking industry, and there's a lot of parallels between banking and telcos. So Mack, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you, JP. Will, it's great to meet you. I am an enterprise decision intelligence executive. I turn fragmented customer, market, and behavioral signals into enterprise-level decisions. I was the global market research and insights executive at Bank of America. I have over 30 years of experience in insights, analytics, and research. I led a global team that focused on customer experience, product innovation, brand tracking and development, and I found myself very frequently in a merger and acquisition space as our company went through a significant growth phase.
Wow. So you've seen a lot of changes in the banking industry. So yeah. Tell me about, how are insights created within your role? Is it qualitative, quantitative, or is it tracking? Explain a little bit about the metrics and processes.
JP, it's all of that and more. One of the things we've noticed in the insights and research industry over the last 10, 15 years is a fragmentation that really has not been helpful in pulling one cohesive story together to give executive decision makers the information that they really need. So qualitative research, quantitative research, different forms of analytics, cultural anthropology, ethnographies, all of those things, along with competitive intelligence, financial information, needs to be pulled together, synthesized, and then the insights extracted, the insights flow from that consolidation of that information. So for me, I lead all of that. I'm not one thing or another. I don't have a preference. I need to use the right combination of tools to answer the question that is in front of us from the business.
And these questions, are these ongoing, they emerge out of business planning questions, or are these reoccurring questions that you're tracking?
Yes, they do emerge out of a strategic planning cycle, or at least that's how they should be emerging. So if you look at a lot of companies today, many of them are narrative-led. So someone has come up with a story of what they want the customer to believe about the company, or what they want the strategy to be. But that narrative isn't necessarily supported by customer facts. And we need to turn that around. We need to have the research, the insights, the voice of the customer, the voice of the market develop and influence the narrative, as opposed to the narrative dictating what the answers should be coming out of the research. So the process will be both strategic and tactical. There will be positioning research that helps decision makers understand, is my company seen in the market in the light that we want it to be seen, not how we've decided it is seen, but how the market sees us. And then that should flow into things like product innovation and pricing and brand positioning and customer experience tracking, which is done on an ongoing basis. And to your question, usually with the same questions. But all of this is really about, are we making the right strategic choices before we start spending a lot of money? And are those strategic choices making the difference in the market that we want them to see? And that's where research needs to be connected to the economics, which is one of the failings in this space at the moment. Is, yeah, we got these customer metrics and we got these financial metrics, but it's the role of research working with the finance people to connect the voice of the customer to the financial metrics so that there's real information that says, as I move this lever, then I get this outcome.
So you identified one pitfall, which is this disconnect between the business needs and the insights. Are there other pitfalls that you've seen, the challenges you faced when you were doing all of this research and reporting up to the senior leadership team? Are there other pitfalls that, that we can share with our audience that they should be watching out for?
Well, I think, as I mentioned, one of the biggest gaps at the moment is that space between who is creating the narrative. So is the narrative being created by the executives, or is the narrative being created by the market? And if it's created by the market, then wonderful. There should be coherence between what the market wants, what the executives know the market wants, and then how the executives translate those market needs into the strategies and tactics that the company fulfills. When it's the other way around, then there's real disconnect between the market's needs and the company's behavior. That's one of the really big pitfalls at the moment, is what is the direction of the creation of your narrative? And then there are some very traditional things that we keep running into, and you've seen it yourself, we've talked about it over the years, is you hear someone say, well, you didn't ask the right questions. If you had asked different questions, we would have got better scores. And that's just a reflection that says someone thinks that you're not asking the questions that confirm the pre-existing narrative, as opposed to using questions that then shape the narrative. And one of my favorites in terms of what the pitfalls are in research, and this is one of those that when you get asked the question, researchers tend to freeze. It's like, oh, wow, I didn't think of that. Let me go run and find the answer for you. And that's when someone says, well, the customer says one thing and does something else. But you know what? Over a very long time of thinking about that question, what I learned is the insight is in that gap. The insight is we didn't spend enough money on advertising. We didn't do the right advertising. We were shutting stores rather than opening stores. We had our customers go through a long menu-driven IBR process that really, really put them off the company.
Yeah.
And it is that kind of gap where the insight lives, not a challenge to the quality of research. There is also, JP, a lack of governance. So that's one of the biggest real drivers of the pitfalls of let's make sure that we get the right people in the room, from leadership, from customer experience, from technology, from procurement, and that what we're doing is research that is the right research to answer the business question, and that the information that comes back isn't biased, isn't spun, is completely ethical. And even though the answer may not be comfortable. It's the truth.
Mm.
And we want to work with executives who don't feel that if they don't hear the story that they want to hear, then the research is wrong and the researchers must be punished. They need to have answers that ensure the success of the company, the success of shareholders and stakeholders, and the satisfaction and success of their customers. And that may be a hard truth, but it's still the truth.
Yeah.
So, Will, you've been there. So, why don't you talk about your experience with research and see if it aligns with Mac?
I was going to ask a question because you piqued my interest. Don't get me started, Mac, on IVRs, by the way. That's my pet topic. I could be on my soapbox for hours. But here's a specific example from the telecom industry. They're going through somewhat of an identity crisis. A lot of telcos were born in the wireless industry that is very fast, very transactional. And now through merger and acquisition, they're all, pretty much all, selling a much wider converged set of products that are different, sometimes intangible, fiber broadband, TV products, much slower, much more conversation-driven transactions that require a discussion. So they don't know how to deal with that, so to speak. So if a telco came to you with that reality, how would you kind of guide them down a path of making sure that they were collecting, as you said, the right research and asking the right questions?
Yeah, and JP was right. There's a lot of similarities between financial services and telecom as far as the customer's experience goes. Where I would start is, I think one of the things that I've noticed over the past few years is a decade ago, a lot of telecom companies were attempting to develop a personality so that not only did you buy a service, but you were in some way affiliating yourself with a firm that had its own unique personality. I think over time, that's been lost. And there is a homogenization, if you would, of the different images and perceptions of those firms, driven by price, driven by performance and quality. And you're right, the difference between I've got wireless, I've got fiber, I've got whatever. Well, if you were an engineer, that sounds really, really great. But if you're a customer, well, what did that get you? Did it get you a lower price? Did you get faster quality? Did it get you more reliability? Those kind of tangible experiences are what the telecoms need to be measuring on an ongoing basis. So how are you differentiated from your competitors in a positive way? How does your product perform in terms of reliability? When your customers do directly relate and interact with your employees, whether that's an AI model or people or both, is it an empathetic experience? Does the customer come away feeling like you really had my best interest in mind? And all of those factors, starting with how are we positioned? What is our reliability? How do our processes and service score? And what are we doing not just to correct problems, but to build a model that the market really wants? So it's moving toward the ideal, not just resolving problems. And all of that are things that the executives within the telecom companies need to be measuring on an ongoing basis, especially at a time where many of those firms are transitioning from the keypad IVR, which almost forces the customer to have an understanding of how the telecom company is organized internally, to something that is more AI driven, where the artificial intelligence is hearing this is the customer's issue, And these are things that I could actually resolve for the customer. And here are things that I need to get the customer into the right human being so that that person can use judgment, that person can use their experience to solve the problem. And that's a transition that I know a number of the firms are going through at the moment. And it's a big part of really understanding, am I giving an empathetic experience to the customer? Did that answer your question?
It did. And I think it's a great parallel that you drew there around the differentiation. I'm working in one global market that will remain nameless, but there are 4 big operators. And one is yellow, one is red, one is blue, one is orange, and they are all the same. And it's a problem.
So Mack, you talked about this empathy and AI, which is obviously the rage of discussion at any conference or any meeting. But let's talk about emotional evaluation, because we know that most decisions are done emotionally. What have you seen or leveraged on sentiment analysis? I know that a lot of banks are using that AI sentiment analysis on their assisted channels, their phone service. But give me some insights. Or do you have any insights on, evaluating the emotional equities of consumers and in their engagement with brands?
Yes, and we can talk about that for the next month. So many of the, there's a number of tools, and I would start that qualitative emotional alignment conversation, not necessarily with the let's go and look at what people said in the qualitative response or what we captured in a servicing interaction. But I would start with qualitative research. And I'm not a huge fan of focus groups, but I do like observational ethnographies, and I like in-depth interviews. And what you're trying to gain from those kind of observations and those discussions are, tell me about the personality of this company. Tell me about the personality of a company that really delivers the experience that I want. How are those personalities different? So if you were to do research and you were to say, if this company was a human being, tell me about it. Who is it? And if someone said, well, they're deeply caring, they really have my best interest at heart. These are the things this person would do for me. And if they said, well, they're just in it for the money. They really don't care about you once they brought you in. And the quality of the interactions I have with them, well, they're very cold. They're distant. They're beyond arm's reach. And then you would say, well, tell me about the human being that would represent the company and the experience you would want to have. Then you would know how those things differ. And then you could take that information into sentiment analysis within all of the rich information that they should be capturing from the customer's direct interactions, either through open-ended questions on surveys or through the call center experience. And you can match, here are real words that people are really saying that reflect those personality profiles, those personas that you have developed from your qualitative research. And you could build almost a coherence map. So here is the idealized experience. This is where we want to be. This is what our customers say they would move business, they would stay with, they would be happy with. To Will's point, so many of these firms now are bundling. So we don't just offer this, we offer a spectrum of products, and it's beneficial to you if we bundle that together. They've moved into concentric spaces like cybersecurity. All of those things extend their business model. Now, can we build some coherence in all of those things so that the customer feels the experience they're having, either quantitatively or emotionally, is aligned with the experience that they really want to have? And that's how I would use, or we should use, or how they should use different sentiment analysis tools, both on a small scale through ethnographies and IDIs, and on a large scale through all the very rich information they have in their open-ended questions and in their live interactions.
If you enjoy the insights in this podcast, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. If you are wondering if your telco brand needs a transformation to ensure it remains relevant as AI is impacting how people purchase your services, please take a few minutes to take our online transformation assessment. You will receive insights based on our industry benchmarks on areas you can improve and remain competitive. Now let's get back to the podcast.
Great. Great point. So you had an opportunity. We're launching this assessment tool that is AI enabled on, are you ready for transformation? And you had an opportunity to experiment with, or the question is, are you ready, Mack, for transformation? But how would an organization leverage the insights coming out of that assessment tool?
You and I have both had experiences where someone said, well, that's interesting information, but it's just not actionable. And we've had to pause and we've had to say, well, is that true? Or is this person just trying to resist figuring out how to move from this piece of information to this business outcome? And what I experienced with the new tool that you have developed, and I was really impressed with it, is that it takes a very straightforward, small set of very insightful questions and then translates that into, okay, this is where you competitively stand right now. Here are strengths, here are weaknesses, here are gaps between you and your competitors, you and where you could be. And it doesn't stop there. And that's what I liked so much about this, is it moves from an evaluation of where you are to a very prescriptive set of, here are things you could consider, you could do that improves your performance. And so many firms lack that, or choose not to force themselves to develop that. So that predictiveness, that prescriptiveness is built into this tool, and then the company can decide how they use it. So it could be, like my experience, one person takes the test and says, oh, this is what I can do. Or they could say, well, we as a working team will pull together different executives from different parts of the company, and either as a group or as individuals, we can use this tool and we can come back with a set of recommendations that then we would need, either ourselves or working with the right consultant partners. We're going to develop an action plan that moves from these prescriptions, these recommendations, to a more ideal state. And here are the list of the things that we're going to do to get from here to there. And here is the very first step we're going to take to start that journey. So your tool removes excuses. It removes someone saying, I don't know what to do with this, because it goes from, here's where you are, here's your strategic imperatives, and here is a set of specific actions you can take to put yourself in a better situation.
So when you look at those assessment tools, are there gaps? Or, if you can give us advice, if you've done the assessment, are there gaps or areas that you think we've overlooked or we need to amplify, or has it covered the range?
I think it has covered the vast majority of the situations that most firms will find themselves in very well. And now there's probably an opportunity to build into that some type of iterative, now let me take the recommendations and I'm going to put my own action plans into the tool. If I do this, then will that accomplish this recommendation? So there's probably almost a strategic journaling component that could be added that you would use as a project management tool to track the progress against the recommendations that can then be fed back in. It's also, here is, point of our conversation with the market research. Here are things that we're learning from the market. So if I use this tool with information from my customers and prospects and information about my competitors, then I should be able to update this using the next wave of that information. And the tool could say, yeah, you're making progress, or you need to tweak this a bit, hadn't quite got it right. Or you just need to be patient because it takes a while to shift the market's perception. That kind of journaling progress tool will add to the quality of the analysis. The other things, when I spent some time before our conversation looking at the telecom industry, and Will's point around the absence of differentiation. There's also, though, a lot of grand strategies that these firms are applying all at the same time. So concentric diversification, horizontal diversification, product development, geographic expansion. It's a lot of balls up in the air at the same time to keep track of. So if you had a filter that said, here are some generic grand strategies. We are following these strategies, at least within our own narrative. Now tell me, when I answered these questions, was there coherence between my answers and what I thought my grand strategy was? And this is how I would adjust that. That's my only feedback. I think it was a great tool and very actionable from the point of view of moving from current state to future state, which is what a lot of decision makers need to get the process rolling.
Yeah.
So
That's so. I'm sorry, Jimmy. I was just going to make a comment on there in that I see a lot of executives in these firms are so busy firefighting and fixing problems and working in their business that too few pull themselves out. And I think something like this is a great way that somebody can work on their business and then really try to curate the experience along the story arc that they want to have with their clientele.
Yes,
So
and your point's really well taken. You're inside the space. I'm not. But when you see the executives feeling that they have to be almost from the very top of the company all the way down into the day-to-day operations of the company, that says that they're not able to really have that time for strategic reflection that is so necessary. So that becomes an issue around delegation, and it becomes an issue around corporate coherence. I think in some of the research I did before our time together, there seems to be a sense that the executives know what their story is. But as that story moves down through the organization because of legacy systems, because of a slowness in integrating mergers, incentive plans that don't really align with the strategic direction, a number of things scatter that strategic intent. And then that, to your point, Will, forces the executive to try to pull it all together all day long. And it's exhausting. It's not effective. And it keeps them from doing the strategic work that really is what they're in their seat for, not to hold the pieces together.
Great point, Mac. So, Mac, we're at the top of the half hour here. If you were to give 3 action takeaways to the audience, what would they be?
For me, the 3 takeaways that we've discussed or have hit at is the research needs to be linked to the economics. So we see marketing budgets being cut. We see research budgets being cut, research teams, and not necessarily in telecom or financial services, but you see this a lot in entertainment at the moment. Entire research organizations being dismantled. And for me, that says research and marketing has to prove its contribution to the bottom line. It also has to have the courage to stand up and claim that contribution. Because to your point, JP, there are dynamics and political dynamics within companies where an executive may attempt to accrue all wins to themselves. And that's why you need to have a chief marketing officer who sits at the CEO's table and is a peer to the business line executives who can say, this is marketing's contribution to the bottom line. And then research can say, this is how research helped you make a decision that was successful. This is how it reduced decision risk. So connect research to the economics, revenue, retention, margin, risk. Research also has to be independent. And this is part of the paradox. We always think of market research or marketing research as a marketing function. And when research is allowed to tell those hard stories, to deliver information that you just didn't want to hear, but you had to hear because if you didn't, you really couldn't give the customer what they wanted. But if the bias is too strong, if the situation is such that the research team just doesn't feel safe delivering the truth, then perhaps it needs some organizational realignment. It needs a very, very transparent governance process. Truth-telling has to be rewarded. And for that to happen, it has to have executive support. So the voice of research as an unbiased, independent function has to be maximized and protected. And then to ensure the quality of the strategic product, you move away from research as a reporting function to predictive research that's integrated into the planning and strategic management process, and that's action-oriented. The tool you've developed definitely helps with that integration and action orientation, and the research products need to say, this is what you need to be doing, and that voice needs to be respected. There are cultures in which research is expected only to deliver the numbers, and that shortchanges the value of the research. The researcher should be safe to deliver a set of recommendations that the business can then act on. So the future of research is not in reporting, it's in decision intelligence. It's in reducing the risk of the decision before significant funds are spent and potentially wasted on the wrong choices.
Great. Those are great points, Mac. Thank you very much for sharing your insights. I hope our audience sees value. Please, if you're listening to this podcast, we have a white paper that talks about measuring what matters, which really talks to a lot of the points Mack has raised during his presentation. And please take the self-assessment tool. You'll find some key insights on, are you ready for transformation? Is the market dynamics shifting? And are you keeping up with those trends? Mack, Will, thank you very much. I hope everyone has a great day and that you saw value in this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean-Pierre. Thank you, Will.
Thank you.